I would like to encourage everybody to listen properly, that we do not give in to our frivolity. And what we are discussing at this point is extremely precious and dangerous. It is necessary to pay attention. To develop some sense of basic openness as well as a basic caution. That you should be able to hear, understand the subject matter that we are discussing is not particularly complex or technical. We are discussing in a level that it is very simple, understandable. So that seemed to be the first point I would like to make, is that frivolity becomes an obstacle against freedom. When we talk about freedom, we are free, open. But when we talk in terms of frivolity, it is very tight and it is very ostentatious. Exercising freedom could be said as frivolity from that point of view. So it is necessary for people to be tentative and precise so that we don't waste our time. And that seems to be very important. In fact, that is what we might discuss in terms of sacredness. A sacredness or holy object, holy principle, powerful principle, does not just come down in the middle of one's frivolity and change the whole thing and zap you. But this whole thing had to be deliberately worked out. There's some sense of a deliberateness which is necessary, some kind of exertion, some kind of openness, devotion from that point of view of devoting what we are doing, actually paying attention to what we are discussing, seem to be important. Otherwise, there's a possibility that we might lose the whole point, that we might lose the reference point, or the point that we have nothing to work on, which is sometimes known as the tantric practice is rangsang, or self-secret. That once a person is taken over by frivolity, that you can't hear, you can't see, you just become a robot. That the point of the discussion becomes irrelevant at that point. Because as far as the teacher is concerned, the teacher is talking to a corpse, a stone wall, robot. So, in order to not waste yours as well as my time, we should be thinking twice of how we're handling ourselves in this particular situation. Pay more attention and open up, obviously, but it is necessary to make such caution, and I think it justified somewhat that it is absolutely necessary to be a good audience. And you can do so by paying attention in terms of what's being said, what's been discussed, what the conclusions are, so forth. So I would like to set that the ground. We will be discussing all kinds of other things in connection with the teacher and student relationships later part of our course. But at this point I would like to raise that point because it seemed to be necessary for us to take heed of that. The subject that we're going to discuss tonight is that of the three types of world in the Tantric tradition presents. The ordinary world, that is to say, the world of the dhatus, which is perceptions that we perceive, sound, sight, taste, feeling, physical feeling. And so forth. The ordinary world of perception. And that is regarded as part of the mandala principle. When we talk about a mandala principle at this point, we are purely talking in terms of interlocking relationships rather than magical circle. Something extraordinary, the magical setup, but we are talking about in terms of coordination from one point to another point. It is like filmmaking. You have edited visual exposure, and then you have to edit the sound exposure at the same time. It goes along with it. That's the same thing what happens in our everyday life situation. We see a person comes to you, speaks to you. We enter into a restaurant, we begin to hear the clutterings of the pots and pans and the smell of food, and you maybe got turned on to that restaurant or turned off by their restaurant mandala ship that we watch a person, somebody introduce you, this is a good friend of mine, I would like to meet him. And you say, how are you? You sit down with that person, and the person speaks. He behaves in a certain way that we begin to feel either we like that person, maybe on the grounds of recommendation of our friends, or else that a person will feel it is worthwhile to relate with such a person, associated with such a person, that there is a feeling is taking place constantly. You have some kind of feeling as to when your car breaks down, you stop in the gas station, one of the passengers decided to step out and ask a question to the gasoline attendant, and how far is from here to the next motel? And you can tell the way that a person behaves when the person brings back the message from the little kiosks in the gasoline station office. You can tell that the answer is going to be favorable or it is disappointing. And such kind of setup, kind of intuitive setup, is part of the external world that we're talking about at tantric level, that there is actual relationship that involves. There is something is happening, or for that matter, something is not happening. There is actual relationship is taking place. We have that situation constantly happening. That doesn't have to be a particularly superstitious thing, but we have actually personal experiences of the whole thing. Sense of reality from that point of view of mandala concept is concerned. When we talk about a mandala, we are not talking about magic particularly at this point, but we are purely talking in terms of what is cohesively possible to relate with. Some setup happens to be unpleasant, destructive, unworkable, and some setup happens to be creative, workable, and pleasant. That kind of a general pattern that has link with you and the rest of the world, which is your world, your creation in any way. There's a repose taking place constantly. That there is some kind of network of system, functional organization, circulation of something's taking place, as if I'm just about to catch flu. You begin to feel that the world is not particularly favorable to you, and whatever you experience, whatever you felt, is somewhat strange, étrange, as French would say. There's something is not quite clicking. You feel numb already, unhealthy already. The world outside is somewhat too solid, and you can't make that too softness in you, vulnerability in you, and the world is being very hardened and heavy, and you can't make connections. That is signs of fever. There's some discrepancy happening in the mandala setup. Oh, that in itself is a mandala setup, actually. There's enormous relationship of that type taking place. When you begin to work with the reality properly, our external world, according to the tantric tradition, talks about how you relate with it. That is not regarded as intuitive world particularly, but external world, that how you handle with hot and cold. If you are in a hot climate, when you walk into a highly air-conditioned place, you catch flu. You get sick. The coordination with the world is not quite right. The usual problem that we experience is when we begin to cut the relationship between world outside and our own world, body, that we have a problem there. That we don't acknowledge our sense perceptions properly, thoroughly, and real, and we find ourselves in trouble. Not because that what we perceived is poisonous particularly, but how we perceived it becomes incompetent, haphazard, or confused. So in turn, it turns into poison. So from that point of view, we can't say that phenomenal world that we're living in, the policemen, the traffic, and the presidency, and the policies that goes around the United States of America are bad and devilish. We can't condemn the world. We can't put the world into such a package, which is very convenient for us to do so, of course. If we have categories, then we know what we're doing. We go peace march. You're trying to kill the president, impeach, whatever you have, all kinds of possibilities. And somehow that doesn't work, that you are fighting your phenomena at the same time. Phenomena is yours. It is your country, your air, your earth, your food, your water, your electricity, your policemen. And it is not necessary to make such a big deal out of this. And that is one of the problems that will come up in early stages of American tantric revolutionary process that took place, which is highly tantric inspired, took place in the early of the century. But still, that there were some misunderstandings that tantric inspired should become politicians. They should fight for the peace. They should find any holes that exist in the governmental structure, become too politically inclined rather than search for spirituality. And we have lost a lot of good people, inspired people, misdirected in many ways. The tantric revolution didn't quite work because the students who are inspired into tantric situations have become misdirected by themselves, by some examples, some ideas. That we had a problem of case history from that point of view. When we begin to talk in terms of reality, organic reality of natural mandala setup, we are not purely talking in terms of we should reorganize the world. We should fight for it. But we are talking in terms of how we could look at in a certain way, organic way, natural way, that world could evolve itself according to your enlightenment, naturally, or if you like to call it superficially, if you're a hardcore politician, you probably have a difficulty in understanding that kind of wishy-washy philosophy. Obviously you say, don't we have to speak up? Don't we have to sabotage the police headquarters? Or don't we have to carry a big poster of saying, peace on earth, or whatever? When we are talking about a true tantric level at this point, we are purely talking in terms of actual relationships, visual, audio, conceptual relationships, that world outside, so-called world outside, and begin to see there is a thread of continuity, like we discussed earlier on, about Tantra as being a thread. There's some continuity is taking place. Actual continuity is taking place. That we begin to see the setup as whole, rather than setup as impartial, that we are still fighting for the darkness as such. At this point, maybe we could say the tantric attitude to reality is very non-theistic, obviously. There's no other than that, according to Buddhist path. Non-theistic approach to reality. That the world is not divided between God and devil, but the world is totality in itself. It has its own muscles, it has its own brain, it has its own limbs, its own circulation. The world has its own water system, electricity system, and sewage system, automatically built. It is already there. The problem we begin to face is that we can't see them. We can't acknowledge that. We can't even get close to it to see that actually it is true. And that has become one of the biggest problems that we have. We are talking about the totality of the world, not in the sense of love and lighting, that everything should be good and perfect and fantastic and nobody knowing anything bad. But we are talking about a reality that the good is made out of bad, and bad is made out of good. Therefore, the world can exist in its own good-bad level. It's a self-existing level, dark and black, dark and white, black and white are constantly there, that one is not particularly fighting for either of those quarters, favorably or unfavorably, that it is workable. It is the universe. That's why we talk about in the Tantric tradition, the world or the cosmos in the terms of mandala, that is the totality, that's the universal quality. Not because somebody has made compromise. Okay, if you turn your badness down and I turn my goodness down, then we have a happy medium. We have a good and bad in a gray level. We have a happy medium. That's not happy medium, that's gray, very depressing. That's not possible. That's one of the depressing aspects of ecumenical movements that is taking place in this country and the rest of the country. That everything should be okay, there's no problem, everything's good, that the bad should come up to the level of goodness, good should come down to understand the badness. So then we have some happy medium. There could be a communist Buddhist, or there should be Nazism, tantric practitioner. And somehow it doesn't work. It's too silly. We've been talking about the external world as how it could be a mandala situation, naturally linking, naturally working together, constantly able to work together. And then the second step is the second type of mandala, which is that of body. Body is kind of what's known as inner mandala. physical body is inner mandala, which is connected with how you handle your body in a sense of awareness, sense of reality. Again, that such awareness, such reality is very deliberate. At the beginning, you might find yourself working with the body might become too much of a trip, exaggerated form of behavior. But however, that seemed to be necessary, that we haven't actually regard our body as a sacred property. And particularly in the Western world, if I may say so, that there has been a lot of neglect of this particular approach to your body. That life is regarded as hassle. You've been born, you've been fed, you've been put into diapers and breastfed or bottle fed or whatever. Those were the unpleasant facts of life. And now I can do it properly. I can go to the toilet. I can drink my cup of tea. How victorious I am. And that's the victory as far as we have gone through. We haven't actually worked out the art of life, how to handle, how to care for our body. And a lot of things regarded as enormous hassle, that getting up in a certain time and doing things without humor, and writing checks, going to the bank, going to the restaurant, and everything's hassle. The only delightful situation we might find is probably get drunk in a party, that you have a fantastic time, you can dance with whoever finds your partner might be, and then you can pass out peacefully. That seems to be a very crude way of handling one's body, actually. There's no dignity, absolutely none whatsoever. You might be told by your parents, who might belong to a sophisticated background, aristocracy or something, and they might teach you table manners and how to drink, how to use forks and knives, how to sit and observe table manner and make a good conversation. But still, there's a fundamental crudeness involved with that, because those were the facade that be told to you, rather than what should be felt, rather than the whole thing you should be how to handle. So we have a problem there, actually. Person could be extremely good at table mannered, eat well, could pass through diplomatic circles, and absolutely immaculate and impeccable. But still, there's a fundamental crudeness, that not knowing how to relate with your cup of tea, your table, your plate, your chair. There's enormous problems with that. That you can only trust in your what to be told rather than how you feel. And the person becomes very crude from that point of view. And in fact, you're trying to become a good actor rather than a real person from that point of view. There's just a side way comment we might make on terms of students who Zen is concerned. That students be told to keep good position, good posture, and more person give the perfect posture is close to enlightenment. And that has become also a problem at the same time, as much as the children of aristocracy who brought up their good table manner. the same time. There's some kind of problems involved, body problems involved, physical problem, actual body problem, nothing to do with the politics, society, but actual body problem. When you've been told how to handle yourself, you begin to automatically pick and choose that you've got to be a good actor. It doesn't matter how you feel. You might be in tears, but you still put your gleaming smile. Make polite conversation. If you couldn't find any good thing to talk about, just talk about the weather. And there's some kind of problem involved with that. When we talk about tantric traditions of body working is concerned, is actually fundamentally there's an intentional approach to life as to how to handle your body, how to speak, how to look, and how to touch your cup, your fork or knife, how to lift, and how to carry about. Those lessons are not deliberately presented as a manual written in a book, that eating books of tantric traditions or anything like that. But it is to develop basic attitude as to when you begin to extend your arm, you do it. When you begin to touch, you touch it. When you lift it in a very confident level. You just do it. You have a real experience of confidence, and some kind of reality is involved there. It's not a big joke to raise people into tantric aristocracy or deceptive king. But it is very real how to handle with your body situation, and sense perceptions, and how to look, how to feel, how to handle the whole situation, how to listen, how to relate with the whole thing is very deliberate. But at the same time, the heart of deliberateness is freedom at the same time, which is very important to know that when we talk about the crazy yogis of the tantric tradition, we are not talking about just hanging out in the street corner and doing their crazy trips. We are talking about something very real, something very dignified. A Vajra-like nature we talked about the other day. The sense of indestructibility is always work there. There is intention, there's reality, there's discoveries involved constantly. That is the thing what we're talking about from this point. And then we have the third mandala situation, what's called the mandala of the sacred realm. The sacredness and secretness at the same time is not so much of sense of highly evolved that you can look down upon the outer mandala and the inner mandala. That basically the secret mandala consists of psychological behavior, meditative behavior, which we could quite simplify into that of sense of awareness, sense of openness, that has no hesitation, none whatsoever, to deal with one's emotions. The hidden things, that little areas of irritation, which might mean great, that you regard it as a little problem, but in fact is one of the biggest problems that we have. Problems with relationships of all kinds. That there the notion of a mandala, or the interwoven mandala, the mandala setup, is that emotions are all interwoven. They're connected. Passion is connected with aggression. Aggression is connected with ignorance. Ignorance is connected with the envy, jealous, and so forth. There is a continual web that is very obvious, very real, taking place. In other words, the person should regard that all the emotions from tantric level is that not one big deal, but all big deals. That all the emotions that exist in the person's mind are the same problem, all same promise for that matter. Because it's the same problem and the same promise, that there is a seed of freedom, liberation is involved. Or you can talk in terms of imprisonment involved. There's a sense of continuity, a sense of openness at the same time. When you lose your temper, in outrageousness, you're outraged, you're about to strangle your partner. And in fact, you begin to do it. There is a demonstration of a mandala display. You're angry, you feel passionate, you feel jealous, you feel ignorant. And all of those things happening at once. It's a real experience. But there's no how to do it. You did it already. That is your chance, in fact. That's your golden opportunity. You have manifested a secret mandala already. I think if I say too many things on that particular subject, you're going to get confused. So probably we could leave it up to a discussion period, which might be much clearer. But I will not go over the whole thing, but the three principles of mandala we are talking tonight is that a very important basic point of tantric teaching. The external mandala is connected with the perceptual world outside, society, politics, organizations, domestic relationships and everything. Internal mandala is connected with your body, how to live with your body, basically, fundamentally. And then the secret mandala is related with how to deal with your emotions. Those are the three principles that we should look into. We should try to study on that particular point. Okay, maybe we should have a discussion period. would like to request you in terms of a question pattern is if you can simply keep up to the topic that we discussed and relate with the whole thing, because your question becomes partly concerning you, obviously, but also that got to concern a lot of the rest of the students here at the same time. So keep that in mind and don't get carried away into areas that we haven't discussed or we have discussed already. Thank you.
What is the difference between someone who does something right and somebody the same
person?
What? Somebody who's doing something with confidence and somebody who's doing something not with confidence or not right, or with that attitude that you're talking about in the second world?
I don't see any problems with that. It seemed to be the same.
But you said to do it with dignity, but sometimes it doesn't appear as if things are being done with dignity, or I don't understand where that confidence comes from or what's happening with it. I feel that I'm doing something wrong sometimes, but I don't. Or maybe I feel that I'm doing something right and I'm really doing it wrong.
I think that's splitting your hair. You're trying to separate tea from the water when it's already brewed. Good luck, sir.
Rinpoche, you were talking about the external mandala. How does one relate to the world when the world appears very negative, hostile, unfriendly, unkind, unloving? In the sense of what is one's practice at that point? What does one actually do?
Can you say that again, please?
You were talking about the first mandala, the mandala of externality. If the external world is very hostile to one at that point, or any point, when it's very negative, unkind, it's unloving, it's hurtful, it's very hostile, or it appears so, how does then one relate in a practical sort of way? What do you do? Maybe in relation to how you'd react to it, but basically, what do you do?
Well, I think it's the same, saying the same thing. You just do it. When we begin to talk about how to handle the situation, that's an extremely tricky question. That saying that when you begin to say, how can I achieve such thing? That is like imploring your attorney that you go to your attorney, you say, how can I present my case? And the attorney would say, with his experience of your case and the case of the establishment together, an attorney would say that you should be saying this and this, you should be handling this, you should dress up this way. So since this particular approach doesn't need an attorney, or in fact attorney becomes irrelevant, it's just a meeting of the points together. So the question of how doesn't involve But the question of trusting oneself, one just doesn't do it.
This description of the mandala is like concentric rings, and in the middle is us. Like we're, one is in the middle. Is that right?
Well, it depends on who you are.
Well, anyway, what I was wondering is how does that relate to no existence or non-existence? I mean,
Yeah.
who's in the middle?
Sure. Anything you say. Anything you say. Anything you say. That's true. Good luck, sir.
I don't understand what you mean about the second mandala. I'm not clear on it at all.
I think it's simply associated with the body. In terms of bodily perceptions, that the body becomes problematic in a lot of cases. Food and clothes and all kinds of behaviors that you might point out as being tantric lifestyle. The caution is that there is no such thing as real tantric diet or tantric behavior as such, but it had to become a very personal experience.
Okay.
Good luck.
Rinpoche, I just have one comment to make about the lecture tonight. And of course,
What?
I have one comment to make about the lecture tonight and about the course in general, and that is, good luck, sir.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch what you have said. Roshishna?
I was trying to understand more about the relationship between myself and my emotions. And I was wondering when you mentioned that the third mandala had a meditative aspect. In relating to emotions, does that mean really being in the center of them, experiencing them fully, not necessarily acting?
Well, I think these three principles are related together at once, simultaneously. That there's the meditative aspect, continuous, as well as experiential, social problems included the whole thing. We can't separate them as being practiced in separate times, but we do it at once. Such as like if you have problems with your parents and if you have problems with your employees, if you have problems with your living situation, you do them all together at once. And the whole thing becomes at once things become much more real.
So that involves expressing of emotions very directly.
Well, expressing not in the sense of exploding on the spot and kill somebody and make love with somebody on the spot. But the question here is much more subtle, much more real, in the sense that we haven't actually acknowledged our emotions properly as our experience is concerned. And we've been practicing them without understanding what we are doing with our emotions constantly, which are automatically cop out anyway. When we need to release, we make love. When we need to release, we kill somebody. But that's not quite the way of the sacredness of the emotions is concerned. There's some sacredness involved with the emotions, so that emotions should be regarded as a real thing, an obvious thing that can teach us something. And we should be related with them properly without getting off on something or other. Like saying, I'm bored, let's go to the movies. That's not quite a way to deal with your boredom. It's much more disciplined, much more personal actually, highly personal. That's why it is regarded as called sacred mandala, and put into a third category, which is very difficult to achieve or accomplish, but it seemed to be very important, extremely sacred, because for the very reason nobody had been able to achieve such perfection and even raise such question, yet. So therefore it is necessary to take some kind of respect attitude to it, that it is the thing to do. Good night, madam.
What is the relationship of each of the mandalas to reality, and what is reality?
To reality? Well, I don't think there's a question of relationship between the mandalas and reality, but mandalas are reality in itself already. It's a question of that the practice of reality is like, you might say that what's the question of reality involved if you put your finger on the burning electric ring in your stove. And there's not much room. You get burnt. That's reality. And that's as simple as that, actually.
So the reality is the perception of it, the emotions of it.
Reality what?
The reality is the perception and the emotion.
No,
in
reality is real. And nothing to do with the perception. But application towards reality is maybe perception. But your perception gets burnt or met or blasted by meeting with reality. Meeting with reality as well as the meeting with the reality.
As was what? I didn't hear the last part.
Am I what?
I didn't hear the last part of what you said.
Which one is that? Mating with the reality and meeting with the reality. That's it. One has to communicate with the reality. Otherwise, there's no reality. But then who cares? But that becomes reality at the same time. You got to get away from it. It's very personal. It's very haunting, actually. It's all over the place. Eric?
How do we deal with the mandala principle on the Hinayana and the Mahayana levels?
We are talking about Tantra at this point. And I think if we discuss too much of the other stuff, we're going to be so much confused because there's so much terms and ideas. I would like to keep it very simple. Maybe we are talking about a purely Hinayana level. Who cares? That's in joke. Well, probably we should close our discussion tonight at this point. And I would like to make more emphasis on the study group that's taking place and the students who are taking course in the Tantric class would really much, I would like to encourage you enormously, if you can take part in those and actually study, discuss and work together. That seems to be very important. And the product of this work should be that you have some understanding of Tantra as a beginner's level and a good beginner's level at this point. That nothing is scattered, fragment of ideas picked up, trying to put them together, but something real is happening. And I think there's some more announcement need to be.
The lotus cushion people, the people that have made many cushions for people out there that have bought them through Naropa, works for about 6 weeks, 20 hours a day, really putting their heart and their bodies and burning themselves out and everything, and managed to accumulate, after paying back all their debts, about $200.